What's going on, people? I am B-Dobbins, FTW, and when a major company fucks up in a major way, as 343 did with the MCC, there is a 3-step process they must complete in order to earn redemption. Step 1 is punishment, and at the height of the MCC debacle, my biggest concern was that this step would be skipped, and that's why I put so much effort into super cranky videos designed to rile everyone up. But in the end, it all turned out okay, because 343 got shit on. To put things in perspective, if present trends continue, Halo 5 will probably end up selling less than Titanfall. Currently, it stands at roughly 3.8 million sales, putting it about a million behind what Titanfall ended up with. Now, granted, Halo 5 is obviously at an earlier stage in its lifespan, but as any of you who have followed game sales for any amount of time will know, the vast majority of the game sales are usually going to have taken place by now. It's well after Christmas. It's not as if they're putting out any more television commercials or trailers. I would be very surprised if Halo 5 ever netted another million sales. Now at 3.8 mil in the MCC, which sold even less than that, you have a glaring fall from grace when compared to Halo 4, which, following the success of Halo 3 and Reach, hit about 10 million sales. So the damage to the franchise is clearly extensive and lasting. The sales of the next few Halo games will probably all be a lot lower than they otherwise would have been if they hadn't lost like 7 million customers following the MCC debacle. So punishment, check. Now, step 2 is making sure it doesn't happen again. And as far as I can tell, 343 has implemented policies to ensure such a catastrophic launch isn't repeated. I think it's pretty clear that Forge and Big Team Battle were supposed to ship at launch. Both were advertised as a part of the base game. They've been staple game modes in the base game of every past Halo, but were presumably pushed back a few months because 343 didn't feel they could deliver that stuff in fully functional condition at launch. Or that if they did include that stuff, they wouldn't have time to quality test the game in general. So yeah, you know, some people were a little peeved that that shit wasn't immediately available at launch, but obviously that's much preferable for both sides than suffering yet another broken launch. So step 2, as far as we can tell, check. Now step 3 is repairing the damage done to your brand, and this is the part that I think 343 still needs a lot of help with, and that's evident when you look at the sales numbers of both MCC and Halo 5. Now, I know for a lot of people the whole free DLC thing went a long way towards repairing their image, which is fair, but this doesn't go nearly far enough for nearly enough people, for a few reasons. For starters, me personally, I don't think this decision was primarily motivated by a desire to make amends with Halo fans following the MCC. As I've mentioned before, I think this was a decision of necessity because after the MCC, their sales were so low that they couldn't maintain healthy playlist populations if they fractured the shit with DLC. And even then, I think they would have still charged for the DLC, even knowing it would hurt the user experience through unhealthily low playlist populations. Titanfall and various other games who've had just as low populations in the past, they still charged for their DLC, and they just make it free later on after they've milked it a bit, because if that's the more profitable option, that's what companies are going to do, regardless of the adverse effects on the consumer experience. But again, as I've talked about with Halo, that consumer experience is a primary selling point for the Xbox, so under these special circumstances, I think they had more to gain from the free DLC. So for me personally, I just think it's them looking out for them. They don't win that many brownie points from me for that. But a lot of other people are withholding their brownie points because of the rec pack microtransactions, which have rubbed a lot of people the wrong way for a variety of reasons. Me personally, if it's true that the rec packs are what makes the free DLC possible, I can live with that. Me getting free shit because other people want to spend their money on dumb shit that I would never spend money on, that works for me. But again, under different circumstances, I think they might have just charged for the DLC and then still ran the microtransactions, which is what every other game does. My primary beef with the rec packs is that I think it's very pay to win. I've talked about that before, I'll probably talk about it again, but for this commentary, it's neither here nor there. The point is, the free DLC has had limited success in helping 343 change the negative attitudes many hold towards them. Now granted, as time goes on, if they can manage not to fuck up anymore, the players still on Halo will eventually forget about the tumultuous last couple years of this franchise. But that by itself is not going to repair the damage this franchise has sustained over that period of time. Because the real question they should be asking is, how do you win back the millions of Halo players who abandoned this franchise in disgust? The damage to the Halo brand is much bigger than the perception that, based on the MCC launch, that 343 are greedy and or super incompetent. Obviously that's an important part of it, but at the end of the day, what this is really about is Halo's failure to properly take care of its veterans, okay? Halo 3 had 12 million sales. Now, 3 separate Halo releases later, Halo 5 has about 4 million sales. So there are roughly 8 million Halo players out there who are no longer buying Halo games. Now granted, some of that has to do with increased market competition, and to be fair, yes, Halo had to change to stay competitive. but you gotta take care of your veterans. And yes, it's fair to pursue new customers, but you have to have some level of accommodation for the players who appreciated your game the way it was. This is why many new sequels always have a classic mode, right? If you think of bare bones playlists in the last couple CODs, you know, Advanced Warfare had a non-EXO playlist. RuneScape finally had to bring in old school 2007 RuneScape because they saw such veteran population flight. I believe old school actually has more players now than RuneScape 3, and of course, when what we consider old school RuneScape was introduced, they kept around RuneScape Classic before that because it's generally good business strategy to take care of your veterans, to take care of the customers you already have. But that's where 343 dropped the ball. Halo 4 was the textbook example of what we call selling out. Okay, they abandoned the artistic direction and originality of their product in an attempt to copy Call of Duty and bring in COD players. And for series veterans, it no longer possessed the same kind of gameplay experiences that had made Halo so appealing to them before, and it still doesn't. The simple fact of the matter is, so long as you have sprint in the game, it will never be able to provide the original kind of gameplay that made Halo so popular in the past. When players have the ability to rapidly change their movement speed at any time, maps have to be designed to accommodate that. And that means you can't have fan favorite maps like Lockout or Warlock or Shrine. Those were 3 huge fan favorites, all of which got H2A remakes, all of which provided a variety of unique vertical and close quarters combat gameplay, none of which would function properly or be able to provide that original kind of gameplay with sprint in the game. Because when you can sprint in maps that small, it'd be too easy for anyone to escape any gunfight at any time. It'd be impossible to manage anything resembling map control or holding power positions. It'd be way too easy for anyone respawning to just sprint to the person who killed him before the guy's shields even recharged from the first fight. It'd be way too easy for anyone to sprint at anyone at any time and just fucking melee them in the back because they snuck up on the guy, not because they were sneaky, but because when you can move that fast, it's impossible for enemies to detect you consistently, because even if you look away from your minimap for a second, that's long enough for a motherfucker to sprint across the map and get you. And so sprint, activated on those kinds of maps, just results in super frustrating, randomized, and unfun experiences. And that's why when you see them bring in a quote-unquote remake of old Halo maps in H4 or H5, the map dimensions are always way fucking bigger, like on the Truth map or what have you. But, of course, when you make them bigger, it ruins the close quarters and vertical combat that made the shit so special in the first place. So obviously, following the universal distaste for H4, they reformed Halo 5 Arena to try and look a little bit more like Halo 3. I say look because it certainly doesn't feel or play the same, because so long as you have sprint, you can't have the kind of gameplay that made Halo special in the past. So after sprint gets added to the game and distorts the Halo gameplay experience, many series veterans stayed on Halo 3, and at one point Halo 3 actually had higher playlist populations than Reach or Halo 4. Now, the MCC was supposed to be Halo's version of old school RuneScape, right? They know they can't keep Halo veterans happy and have sprint in the game at the same time. It's just not possible. So the MCC was supposed to be a separate entity where series veterans could play and enjoy their preferred Halo experience, while 343 continued to innovate and change newer Halos to appeal to newer and different audiences. But for obvious reasons, the MCC didn't work out, and that's the true tragedy of the MCC. Traditional Halo players and series veterans were left behind because they did their best to sweep the very existence of the MCC under the rug, hurting its playlist populations even more than the failed launch already had, and then they never did one thing, not one fucking thing, to revive those populations. And now most series veterans agree that it's not a consistently viable option to go back to the MCC because the game is quote-unquote dead. Why do we call a game dead when its populations are so low? For the same reason we say a car battery is dead or a human being is dead, because it has lost its functionality. The most important work 343 needs to do to repair Halo's brand, to revive sales, and make Halo great again is reconnect with traditional Halo players and series veterans and bring them back into the fold. And there's a very easy way to do this, and the fact that they haven't already done this is further testament to the incompetence of 343 management. What I'm about to propose should have been obvious from the start. Halo 5 should include a classic Halo playlist where sprint is deactivated. I'd compare this to Call of Duty, which every year includes an entire set of playlists for hardcore mode, right? Now, in Black Ops 3, if you go look at the playlist population percentages, there are always roughly 30% of the total online players are in hardcore playlists, right? So roughly a third of COD players, based on the data we have available, prefer to play hardcore. Not because they're hardcore, but because they can't aim and don't know how to handle people seeing them on the minimap. But the point is, it's not a majority of COD players who want to play the hardcore version of the game, but it's a sizable enough fraction that every year they get their own set of playlists, even at the risk of diluting the overall playlist populations of core and the game in general, because they know they need to keep these players happy, and they aren't going to be able to keep them happy on core. So they get their own playlist with some features toggled off and some settings tweaked, and that way everyone is happy. Yes, most people prefer core, but COD is able to address minority preferences as well. Why the fuck hasn't 343 done the same thing? It is in the exact same scenario. Look, the majority of Halo players want sprint. I know this, but there's still a significant and sizable minority of players who don't want sprint. Alright, check out this poll that came out just a few days ago, okay, April 2016. People are asked, do they want sprint in Halo 6? 28% say no, take sprint out. 28%. That is roughly equivalent to the amount of players that prefer hardcore COD over core, and those guys get their own playlist. They get 5 of their own playlists. And here's the thing, this poll was run on Halo Waypoint, right? So these are current Halo players still active in the community. I guarantee you if the many millions of series veterans who are no longer playing or engaged with the community, if their preferences were taken, if they got to vote as well, that number would be much closer to 50-50. And of course, if those millions of series veterans' preferences were actually accommodated, they would have plenty of reason to come back to Halo. But even not taking into account those players disengaged from the franchise, you still have roughly a third of current Halo players who do not want Sprint. And it's funny, because after Halo 5 kept in Sprint, after all the complaints about it, I just figured everyone who wanted Sprint out would finally throw in the towel, but they fucking didn't. It is a topic that to this day, every day continues to divide the community. On Halo Waypoint, every day at least one of the trending threads is about Sprint. This issue isn't going away. It's going to continue to divide the community and plague Halo sales until the grievances of this third of the player base are redressed. Now, the one obstacle 343 faces with implementing classic Halo that COD never had to deal with is maps. If you deactivate Sprint, the current Halo Arena maps aren't going to work. They'll be too big and awkward and unfun. They aren't designed to set up the kinds of close quarters and vertical combat gameplay that classic Halo fans miss so much. Plus, even with Sprint, most of those arena maps suck major cock anyway, so developing a whole new selection of maps just for that third of players is maybe too much to ask 343. They can't make that kind of investment of time and resources right now, okay? I mean, just look how long it's taken them to make the simplistic ass content they've put out so far. But the solution to this is easy and obvious. Forge, okay? I guarantee you every single Halo Classic map from Lockout to Warlord to Shrine and whatever else has already been built in Forge and it's out there on someone's file share. 343 should coordinate with the Forge community and the community of cartographers to collect a handful, if not many handfuls, of community-built Classic Remake maps and load them into a Classic playlist where Sprint is deactivated. It's as simple as that. I'd say you put in 2 playlists, maybe 3, you know, Team Slayer obviously, and then a Team Objective and or Action Sack type thing. Maybe you rotate in Classic playlists from time to time depending on how populated the shit is. I mean, COD gives its hardcore community like 5 or 6 playlists, so I don't think 2 is too much to ask. You know, let us use the Halo 2 BR and the classic pistol. I mean, you've already put a bunch of the classic weapons in the game. They're identical to the originals. All the pieces are there to do this playlist perfectly. And I'd even be fine with keeping the thrust pack and clamber activated. I think they'd fit into the classic mode nicely and maybe add some novelty, but it might be some veterans who disagree with me on that. And in the end, you know, it would just finally solve this toxic issue that has been plaguing Halo for the last 5 years, okay? It's this wound on the Halo franchise, and they've bled quite a bit. Stem the bleeding, bring in classic Halo. The MCC was supposed to be the equivalent of COD's hardcore playlist, right? It'd be like if COD came out with an entire hardcore game, right? But guess what? The MCC failed. It is dead or dying, depending on the time of day. 343 never did anything to revive or save it. It was short-term thinking because now you still have the problem of an entire third of your player base who are unsatisfied with the final product. When you look at Doom, guess what? No Sprint. So far, that multiplayer was pretty fun and people are pretty stoked to play it. I know why they put in fucking Sprint. I get on MCC with my boy Marky. First thing he says when we start playing, man, they need to put in Sprint. People hate having to go slow. They are impatient. It's just this instinctive urge they immediately feel when they play the game and they want to get to where they want to go and they want to get there fucking fast. I've had the urge too. I know lots of people who have. But games shouldn't be designed around the impatient, lazy urges of random people you're trying to please. As professional developers, the game should be designed to be the best product in your eyes, and I don't think 343 is doing that. I think they tried to copy and paste COD with Halo 4. They got fucked over, so now they're trying to find a middle ground. They're trying to please everyone based on other people's unprofessional criteria. And the fucking joke is that because they had to make the maps bigger to accommodate Sprint, you're not actually getting anywhere faster. It just feels like you're not as slow, but it's an illusion, a hoax, which sucks because they sacrificed the artistic originality and a lot of the fun of this game for nothing but the illusion of not being slow. It's a stupid joke. Now look, Warzone is cool. I give 343 props for it. I've had a lot of fun in it. Sprint complements that game mode wonderfully. Personally, I think if they're going to do Warzone and Arena in Halo 6, they should have Sprint in Warzone and keep Arena Sprint free. That way you please both sides. But I know they're not going to take it out of Arena. I know this. But just bring in 1 or 2 playlists that provide the original gameplay that made Halo great. Throw a bone to traditional Halo players, the fans who supported this series for 10 years before it started trying to steal Call of Duty players. Bring Halo veterans back to the series and make Halo great again. 343 has nothing to lose and everything to gain. The For the Win query of the day is, what would it take for 343 to redeem themselves in your eyes, assuming they haven't already redeemed themselves with you. I think I've asked this before a long time ago, but a lot has changed since then, so we'll see. Thanks for watching. Please remember to rate. This is Batman, signing out.